Imagine you're driving down the interstate, you're in the middle lane, doing maybe 65 miles an hour, keeping pace with traffic.
Just a totally normal commute.
Right. The radio is playing, everything is normal, and then suddenly your dashboard just starts beeping frantically.
Oh yeah, that sharp, really high-pitched alarm.
Exactly, cutting right through the cabin. You look down, and there's this small black device wired into your steering column, and it's flashing a bright LED text prompt that just says BLOWNW.
And you don't have much time to react.
You have exactly 3 minutes. 3 minutes to safely grab this piece of plastic, take a deep breath, and prove to a machine using a highly specific combination of breath pressure and, like, vocal cord humming that you have not been drinking.
Right, which is stressful enough on its own.
Definitely. And if you fail to do this, or, if you just ignore it, your engine won't just shut off. Instead, your car's headlights will begin flashing wildly, and your horn will start blaring in this continuous, deafening rhythm.
It literally turns your vehicle into a rolling siren.
A rolling siren on the highway? Yeah, until you finally pull over to the shoulder.
It's a terrifying scenario if you aren't prepared for it.
Yeah.
But for hundreds of thousands of drivers on the road right now, that exact sequence is literally just a Tuesday morning commute.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an inescapable mandatory part of simply turning the key.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a massive architectural shift in how society handles a very specific public safety issue, which is the DUI.
Right.
For decades, the penalty for driving under the influence was passive. It was a subtraction, really. You crossed a line, society took your driver's license away, and they put it in a filing cabinet somewhere. You were legally immobilized.
At least in theory you were.
Exactly, in theory. But we have a stack of sources in front of us today. Industry architecture reports, legislative breakdowns, policy briefs from traffic safety boards, and they all point to one undeniable fact. That old passive system is totally dead.
Yeah, it's been entirely replaced by a system of active, continuous, real-time behavioral monitoring. We're looking at the nationwide explosion of ignition interlock devices, or IIDs.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to map this out completely objectively. We're going to look purely at the mechanics of this machine, the sprawling policy that mandates it, and, the literal dollars and cents cost of a system that essentially outsources legal enforcement to private enterprise.
Right, because the scale of this is just massive now.
It is. Because if you're listening to this right now, you might think you know what a breathalyzer is. You might picture an officer on the side of the road with a little handheld wand.
Yeah, the classic traffic stop image.
Right. But the modern IID is something entirely different. So before we talk about who actually gets forced to use these devices, we really have to look inside the machine itself. Like, how does this thing actually intercept the physical act of driving?
Well, to understand that, you have to basically throw away the idea of a roadside diagnostic tool.
Well,
A standard breathalyzer is just a snapshot. It tells an officer what your blood alcohol content is at one specific moment in time. But an ignition interlock device is a continuous enforcement mechanism. It's physically and electronically grafted into the engineering of your vehicle.
let's get really practical here then. I get into my car, I put the key in the ignition, and I turn it. What is the IID actually doing in that exact millisecond?
It's breaking the circuit. Think about how a car starts.
Okay.
When you turn the key, or, press the start button, an electrical signal travels from the ignition switch down to the starter relay, which then tells the starter motor to crank the engine.
Right.
The IID sits right in the middle of that pathway. The technician who installs it physically cuts the starter wire and routes it directly through the interlock device.
So it's sort of like a drawbridge on a castle moat.
I like that, yeah.
The starter in your car needs that electricity to cross the moat to turn the engine over, and the IID essentially raises the drawbridge. Until it gets what it wants, that bridge stays up and the electricity literally cannot cross the gap.
That is a perfect analogy. The starter motor is completely electronically isolated. You can turn the key all day and you'll just hear a click, or maybe nothing at all.
Wow.
The vehicle will not start until the interlock lowers the drawbridge. And to lower the bridge, you must provide a breath sample into the handset, which is then analyzed by an internal fuel cell sensor.
Okay, let's unpack this fuel cell sensor, because I hear the words fuel cell and I immediately think of, like, experimental hydrogen cars from the early 2000s.
Right, yeah, the old science fair projects.
Exactly. So what exactly is happening chemically when someone blows into this plastic tube? Like, how does it know if I've had a beer versus a glass of orange juice?
It comes down to a very specific electrochemical reaction. Inside the device, there's a miniature fuel cell consisting of 2 platinum electrodes, and they're sandwiching this acid electrolyte material.
Okay, platinum electrodes.
Yeah. So when you exhale into the tube, your breath hits that first platinum electrode. If there's ethanol, which is the type of alcohol found in alcoholic drinks, in your breath, the platinum acts as a catalyst. It instantly oxidizes the ethanol.
So it essentially burns it.
Chemically speaking, yes.
Yeah.
It oxidizes the ethanol into acetic acid. And here's the crucial part.
Yeah.
That chemical reaction actually releases free electrons. Those electrons create a tiny electrical current that flows through a wire connecting the 2 electrodes.
Wait, really? So the machine isn't actually reading alcohol directly, it's reading electricity.
Precisely. It measures the strength of that electrical current. The more ethanol in your breath, the more oxidization occurs, which means more electrons are released, and the stronger the electrical current becomes.
That is wild.
The device's microprocessor just measures that current and translates it instantly into a blood alcohol concentration, BAC, reading.
That is absolutely fascinating. But it also sounds incredibly sensitive. Like, we always hear about people blowing a .08, which is the legal limit in most of the country. Is this device sitting there looking for a .08?
Oh, not even close. The preset limit on a modern IID is far, far below the legal DUI threshold.
Really?
Yeah, the state sets the parameter, and in many jurisdictions, a blood alcohol concentration of just .02 or .025 will trigger a failure.
That is basically a zero-tolerance machine.
It's exactly designed to be. A .025 limit means it'll detect the residual alcohol from just a single standard drink. But because of how sensitive that platinum fuel cell is, it also picks up ambient alcohol.
What do you mean by ambient alcohol?
Well, if you've just used an alcohol-based mouthwash, or if you've recently eaten something with fermented yeast, like certain pizza doughs or pastries, the device can register a spike of mouth alcohol and fail you.
Let me stop you right there. If I'm listening to this, I'm probably wondering, wait, if I brush my teeth and use mouthwash, my car won't start.
If you don't rinse your mouth thoroughly with water and wait maybe 10 to 15 minutes, your car will not start.
Unbelievable.
A machine is an absolute gatekeeper. It does not possess any context. It only possesses the electrical current generated by the platinum fuel cell.
Wow. Okay, so we have this highly sensitive drawbridge. You blow cleanly, the drawbridge lowers, the car starts. But as we established in that opening scenario, the monitoring doesn't stop once you pull out of your driveway.
No, and that is the most critical operational feature of the system. The initial startup test is really just establishing a baseline.
Right.
Once the engine is actually running, the device enters its continuous monitoring phase, initiating what the industry calls rolling retests.
Right, the beeping on the highway that we talked about. Explain the logic here because, whenever you introduce a technological barrier, human beings immediately look for a technological workaround. If I'm trying to bypass this drawbridge, my immediate thought is, well, I'll just have my entirely sober friends sit in the driver's seat, blow into the machine, turn the key, and then we just quickly swap seats.
Which is exactly what people did in the very early days of Interlock technology.
I knew it.
Yeah, it was known as the curbside startup bypass, but the rolling retest was engineered specifically to destroy that strategy.
How so?
By demanding random breath tests while the vehicle is in motion, usually starting like 5 to 15 minutes after the initial startup, and then randomly every 20 to 45 minutes after that. The machine ensures that the person who started the car is still the actual person driving the car.
Oh, because your sober friend would have to literally ride shotgun with you for the entire journey just to blow into the tube every time it beeps.
Exactly. And the manufacturers, they didn't stop there. Because people then realized they could try to keep a balloon full of sober air in the car.
You're kidding! A balloon?
A balloon. Or they'd even use a compressed air pump to push air through the fuel cell during a rolling retest.
Oh, wow. A literal air pump. People really get creative.
They really do.
Yeah.
So the engineers introduced anti-circumvention technologies. Modern IADs require you to provide a specific pressure, but they also use hum recognition.
Hum recognition. Wait, you have to sing to the machine.
Basically, yeah. You have to hum a specific frequency while you blow.
That's crazy.
The handset has a tiny microphone inside that listens for the resonance of human vocal cords vibrating at a certain pitch. A balloon or a mechanical air compressor simply cannot replicate the simultaneous air pressure and vocal cord vibration of a human diaphragm.
That is an incredible level of technological friction just to, drive to the grocery store.
What's fascinating here is they go even further. Most modern installations now require a wide-angle camera.
A camera inside the car.
Yes. It's usually a small module mounted to the interior A-pillar of the car, right near the windshield. Every single time you provide a breath sample, whether you're starting the car or doing a rolling retest, the camera snaps a digital photograph of the person holding the handset.
So if your sober passenger reaches over the center console to grab the device and blow for you while you're driving, the camera catches it.
Right. The camera captures the passenger's face, it captures the driver's empty hands on the wheel, and it timestamps the whole thing.
Oh, man.
And all of this, every breath pressure reading, every hum frequency, every pass, every fail, every photograph, every single time the engine turns on or off, is logged in the device's internal computer. It is total, relentless data logging.
It's basically a complete digital ledger of your driving behavior.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to the highway scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say a rolling retest is requested. It beeps. You have 3 minutes. What if you just ignore it? Or worse, what if you try to blow and you fail because you actually had a drink with lunch? The car doesn't just shut off, right?
No.
Because mechanically, shutting off an engine at highway speeds means you lose power steering and you lose power brakes. That would cause massive accidents.
Right, the engineers recognize that immediately. A forced engine shutdown while the car is in gear is a catastrophic safety hazard.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
So the device will never actually cut the engine while the car is moving. Instead, if you miss the rolling retest window, or if the fuel cell detects alcohol, the device registers a major violation in the log. And then it initiates a series of escalating physical alarms.
The flashing lights and the blaring horn that we mentioned?
Yes, it interfaces directly with the vehicle's electrical control unit. It commands the headlights and the hazard lights to flash in a strobe pattern, and it triggers the horn to sound continuously.
Wow.
The goal is to make the vehicle so obnoxious, so socially embarrassing, and honestly so visible to law enforcement that the driver has absolutely no choice but to pull over and turn the ignition off.
It forces compliance through extreme public visibility. You are essentially driving a neon sign that says, "Pull me over."
And once you turn the engine off, the drawbridge goes back up.
So you're stuck.
Right. The starter is isolated again. You cannot restart the car until you provide a clean breath sample. And in the background, a cellular modem inside the device has already wirelessly beamed the failure log and the photograph of you failing directly to the state monitoring agency in real time.
This is a staggering amount of surveillance architecture. I mean, we're talking about fuel cells, hum recognition, A-pillar cameras, engine integration, cellular modems. This isn't just a punishment. It's a full-blown technological ecosystem living in the dashboard.
It really is.
And it's precisely because this technology is so airtight that the law has fundamentally shifted.
That is the direct causal link. Absolutely. The law is only ever as expansive as the enforcement mechanism allows it to be.
Right.
If we look back to, say, the early 2000s, ignition interlocks were bulky, they were unreliable, and they were largely reserved for a very specific small subset of offenders.
Well, let's transition into the policy expansion here, because the sources we're looking at show a radical departure from how society used to handle this. Give me the baseline. Like 20 years ago, someone got a standard first-time DUI. What actually happened?
So, for a standard first offense, meaning nobody was hurt, and the blood alcohol level wasn't astronomically high, the penalties were really traditional.
Okay.
A judge would issue a fine, mandate some alcohol education classes, and order a license suspension. Say 90 days to 6 months. You literally hand over your plastic driver's license to the court.
The passive punishment. Society says you cannot drive and expect you to just sit at home and think about what you've done.
Exactly. But the data historically showed the passive punishment is deeply flawed.
Shocking.
Right. A suspended piece of plastic doesn't physically prevent an engine from turning over. Studies referenced in our policy briefs estimate that anywhere from 50 to 75% of individuals with suspended licenses simply drove anyway.
Because they had to get to work. They had to pick up their kids. Life doesn't stop just because your license is in a filing cabinet somewhere.
Exactly. So they drove illegally, entirely unmonitored, relying completely on the honor system not to drink again.
And I'm guessing many of them did drink again?
Unfortunately, yes. This massive blind spot in the system led to intense lobbying efforts, most notably from organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MEDD.
Right.
Their argument was very pragmatic. If we know people are going to drive anyway, suspending their license is basically a fiction. We need to physically prevent the car from starting if they're intoxicated.
So what does this all mean? It introduces the concept of risk management, doesn't it? The philosophy just completely flagged.
It did.
The state realized they couldn't realistically remove the driver from the road, So instead, they decided to strictly manage the risk of that driver operating a vehicle.
Risk management is absolutely the defining term of modern traffic policy. By mandating an IID, the state keeps the driver inside a legally compliant, technologically monitored framework.
Okay, that makes sense.
The driver stays in the economy, they keep their job, but they are electronically tethered to a sobriety requirement. And because the technology proved so reliable at preventing startups, legislatures felt confident expanding the net.
And what a massive net it has become. I mean, we're looking at the rise of what our sources call all offender laws.
Right. As of 2026, the vast majority of U.S. states have adopted all-offender legislation.
Wow.
This means that a first-time DUI conviction automatically triggers a mandatory ignition interlock requirement. There's no more sitting out your suspension. There is no honor system.
It's mandatory right from the start.
If you want to legally operate a motor vehicle, you must install this machine. In some states, even if you choose not to drive, you must still install it on a vehicle registered to your name just to satisfy the court order.
Now, if you're listening to this right now, you might be thinking, good, drunk drivers shouldn't be on the road. Put the machine in their car.
Sure. Yeah.
And on a surface level, that makes total sense. But we have to look really closely at how these laws are actually structured, specifically regarding the duration of the monitoring. Because our sources highlight a massive misconception about the compliance clock.
Oh, the compliance clock is where the reality of the machine clashes hard with human expectation.
Walk us through it.
Well, when a first-time offender stands before a judge, they might be ordered to maintain an interlock device for a standard period, say 6 months.
Right, and people hear 6 months and they think of it like a calendar sentence. You know, you cross off the days on your kitchen calendar, okay, June 1st to December 1st, and then I am done.
But it is not a calendar sentence. It's a performance-based sentence.
Performance-based.
Right. The interlock system is designed to demand a continuous period of flawless compliance before the state will authorize the removal of the device.
I call it the technological treadmill. It requires perfect balance. Let's walk through a scenario to really illustrate this.
Okay, let's do it.
A driver is in month 5 of a 6-month requirement. They have been perfectly compliant the whole time. But one evening, they use that alcohol-based mouthwash we talked about earlier. Or maybe they take a dose of nighttime cold medicine that contains alcohol.
Right, something very common.
Exactly. They get in the car the next morning, they blow into the machine, and the fuel cell registers at peak .03.
So the device issues a startup failure. It logs the event, it takes the photograph, and it locks the ignition.
Now, the driver might immediately realize their mistake, run inside, rinse their mouth out with water, wait 10 minutes, blow again, and pass with a .00.
Happens all the time.
The car starts, and they go to work. No harm, no foul, right? They corrected it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
wrong. The initial failure was permanently logged and transmitted to the state monitoring authority.
Wow. Even though they passed 10 minutes later.
Even though they passed. In many all-offender states, any recorded failure, regardless of whether it was mouthwash, cold medicine, or an actual beer, is viewed strictly as a violation of the court order.
And I'm guessing the penalty for a violation isn't just a fine.
No, it's an extension of the timeline.
This is where the treadmill speeds up.
Exactly. The state might penalize that single failure by extending the mandated period by an additional 3 months. Or, in states with really aggressive compliance laws, the clock might reset entirely back to day
Are
1.
you serious? Month 5 of 6, and you go all the way back to 0.
Back to day 1.
So a nominal 6-month requirement can instantly become an open-ended sentence based on a single chemical interaction with a platinum electrode.
Yes.
There's no human element here. There's no probation officer sitting in the passenger seat saying, oh, I smell the peppermint mouthwash. I understand what happened. It is just a cold digital logic.
It forces individuals to modify their entire lifestyle around the sensitivities of the machine. It demands total vigilance. And the trend is unmistakable. States are explicitly removing the discretionary power of judges to offer grace periods. The data log is absolute.
That is just incredible. And what's really fascinating as we read through these policy briefs is that this philosophy of visible, continuous compliance is now bleeding out of the car's computer system and moving right into the physical world.
Oh, absolutely.
The state doesn't just want the car to know you are restricted. They want the police officer on the street to know it instantly.
Which brings us to the next major phase of this architectural shift. We're essentially moving from the engine block to the driver's wallet. The state's monitoring is expanding to physical markers.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the red stripe license, because this completely changes the dynamic of a routine traffic stop.
It does. To understand the need for a red stripe license, you have to first understand the bottleneck of police database systems.
Okay, break that down.
Think about a standard traffic stop. An officer pulls a vehicle over for, let's say, a broken taillight. The officer walks up to the window, asks for license and registration. The driver hands over a standard, normal-looking driver's license.
Right, and the officer takes that piece of plastic back to the cruiser, types the numbers into their mobile data terminal, and waits.
Precisely. The officer is relying entirely on the digital infrastructure that they access after the initial contact. They have to wait for the state database to query the records, ping the servers, and return the driver's status.
Like, are they suspended? Are they under an ignition interlock mandate? Are they restricted to driving only during daylight hours?
Exactly. And if that database is slow, or if the officer is standing at the window talking to the driver before running the card, the officer is essentially flying blind.
They have no idea who they're talking to.
Right. They don't know they're talking to someone who is currently under strict state supervision.
So legislatures basically realize that if they're going to have hundreds of thousands of people driving under restricted risk management protocols, they need a physical analog to the digital tether.
Yes. They needed a way to instantly broadcast that status.
Enter the heavily marked restricted ID. Ohio is actually famous for this. They historically issued bright yellow license plates with red lettering. People often call them party plates for DUI offenders. But the focus now is on the physical ID card itself.
Right. When an individual is placed on an ignition interlock mandate under these new all-offender laws, their standard clean driver's license is permanently confiscated.
Okay.
The DMV then issues them a specific restricted physical card.
Oh.
And the defining visual feature of this card is a prominent, brightly colored vertical band, often red printed directly onto the plastic, running top to bottom.
So it basically functions as a real-time physical dashboard for law enforcement.
Exactly.
Before a single word is exchanged at the window, the moment the driver hands over that red striped piece of plastic, the officer instantly has critical intelligence.
It totally removes the information asymmetry. The visual code is universally understood by law enforcement within that jurisdiction.
So they see the stripe and they know exactly what's going on.
The officer immediately knows to look inside the vehicle for the IID handset. They know to ask for the driver's specific court-mandated driving hours. It changes the entire posture and safety protocol of the traffic stop from the very first second.
But we have to look at the secondary effect of this. Because a driver's license isn't just used for traffic stops. It is the primary form of identification in modern society. Think about how often you pull your ID out of your wallet.
Oh, all the time. You use it to buy a bottle of wine at the grocery store. You use it to check into a hotel.
Right.
You use it to open a bank account, to pick up a prescription, or even just to enter certain secure office buildings.
And every single time you hand that card to a clerk, a receptionist, or a bank teller, that bright red stripe is completely visible.
Yep.
It is a physical identifier broadcasting your legal status to the general public. That carries an immense social weight.
It does. It introduces an element of public visibility to the penalty. And according to the legislative debates and the sources we reviewed, this visibility is actually considered a feature, not a bug.
Interesting. So it's intentional shaming.
Well, the state's priority is undeniable: real-time signaling to ensure compliance. The minor social discomfort of the offender at the grocery store is viewed as an entirely acceptable trade-off for the immediate communication it provides to law enforcement.
Wow. It bridges the gap between the invisible data sitting on a server somewhere and frontline physical enforcement.
Exactly.
So we have this massive picture now. We have complex fuel cell technology hardwired into the steering column. We have A-pillar cameras taking hundreds of photos a week. We have state laws mandating this for first-time offenders, creating open-ended performance treadmills. And we have custom-printed physical IDs tracking them in the real world.
This raises an important question, though. Who on earth is building, managing, and paying for all of this?
Exactly, because when a state passes a law that suddenly requires 50,000 new ignition interlocks to be installed this year, the state government doesn't manufacture those devices.
No, they definitely don't.
The Department of Motor Vehicles does not hire 50,000 mechanics.
And the state does not build the server farms to process the millions of breath test logs uploaded every single day. They outsource the entire physical reality of the program.
We need to dive deep into the real-world cost and the private architecture of this system because this is arguably the most complex yet least understood aspect of the Ignition Interlock expansion.
Absolutely. The entire IID ecosystem operates through a specialized network of private for-profit companies.
Okay, how does that relationship work?
Well, the state legislature acts merely as the architect. They set the rules,
Yeah.
they dictate the .025 limit, they define what constitutes a violation, and they set the mandate durations. But the day-to-day execution is entirely handed over to private enterprise.
It's essentially a state-mandated oligopoly. The state approves a handful of specific corporate vendors, and those vendors then capture the guaranteed customer base.
Guaranteed by law.
Right. Because as the laws have expanded to encompass first-time offenders, they've created a massive, incredibly stable, and highly lucrative market.
We're talking about an industry built entirely on statutory mandates. The customer base automatically grows every single time a state legislature lowers a threshold or expands an all-offender law.
And the financial burden of this massive private infrastructure is completely transferred onto the shoulders of the individual driver.
Every single cent of it.
Lef broke down a hypothetical budget for a listener based on the cost reports in our sources.
List.
Because this is not just a one-time fine you pay at the courthouse. You are essentially forced to lease a piece of hardware and subscribe to a mandatory monitoring service.
Yes, it's very much a subscription model. It begins with the installation.
Uh-huh.
You cannot install an IAD yourself.
Well, obviously not.
Right. You must take your vehicle to an authorized private service garage. The initial installation fee generally ranges from $70 to over $200.
And that fluctuates wildly based on the car, right?
Oh, heavily.
Yeah.
If you drive a 1998 Honda Civic, the wiring is relatively simple. But if you drive a 2025 hybrid SUV with push-button start, an integrated CAN bus computer network, and advanced anti-theft security protocols, bypassing the ignition is a highly complex mechanical surgery.
Yeah, you don't want someone messing that up.
Exactly. And the private garage charges a premium for that specialized labor.
Okay, so you pay $200 just to have your dashboard taken apart. Then comes the ongoing subscription.
The monthly monitoring fee.
Right.
The private interlock company charges the driver a lease fee for the equipment and a data management fee for the cellular transmission of their breath logs. This typically costs between $60 and $120 every single month.
That is just wild. You are paying a private company $100 a month just for the privilege of starting your own car.
But the costs do not stop at the monthly lease.
Of course they do.
The state requires the fuel cell to be highly accurate, naturally. Platinum fuel cells degrade over time with exposure to moisture and breath contaminants. Therefore, the law mandates physical calibration appointments.
Right, which are every 30 to 60 days, depending on the state, right?
Yes. The driver must take time off work, drive back to the private service center, and have a technician physically test the device.
What does that test look like?
They push a known concentration of alcohol gas into the fuel cell to ensure it still reads accurately. They also inspect the physical wiring underneath the dashboard to ensure the driver hasn't tried to, splice the wires and bypass the drawbridge.
And naturally, the service center charges an administrative fee for this calibration appointment.
Oh, absolutely. Often another $30 to $50 per visit.
Wow.
And finally, when you reach the end of your mandate, assuming you survive the compliance treadmill without any resets, you have to pay a removal fee of around $100 for the garage to uninstall the device and solder your vehicle's wires back together.
Okay, let's add this up. When you aggregate the installation, the monthly lease fees, the bi-monthly calibration appointments, and the removal fee, over a standard 12-month period, the absolute baseline out-of-pocket cost for a driver is easily $1,000 to $1,500.
Easily, and often much higher depending on the state and the vehicle.
And we must emphasize that $1,500 is the cost for absolute flawless compliance.
Right.
The financial architecture becomes aggressively punitive if the driver makes a mistake or simply, runs out of money.
That's where things get really bleak.
Let's talk about the lockout loop, because to me, this is the most dystopian part of the private enforcement model.
Sure.
What happens if a driver simply cannot afford their $100 monthly lease payment?
Well, if a driver misses a payment to the private provider, or if they miss a mandatory calibration appointment because they couldn't get off work, the private company doesn't just send a polite reminder email or refer them to collections.
No.
No. The machine itself is weaponized.
It enters lockout mode.
Exactly. After a very brief grace period, sometimes just a few days, the internal computer receives a cellular signal from the private company to initiate a permanent lockout.
Just over a missed payment.
Over a missed payment. The drawbridge goes up, and the software actively disables the fuel cell. The vehicle will not start, no matter how sober the driver is.
That is incredible. The private company literally shuts down your ability to use your own physical property until you pay them.
Yes, they do.
So the car is just sitting in your driveway, completely paralyzed. How do you actually get out of the lockout?
To restore function, the device requires a digital unlock code, which can only be applied by a certified technician at the service center.
Wait, but the car won't start. You cannot drive it to the service center.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So you have to tow it.
You must pay out of pocket to hire a tow truck to haul your own paralyzed vehicle to the private calibration shop.
Are you kidding me?
No. Once there, you must pay the private provider the back-owed lease payment, plus a specific lockout reset fee, plus any late fees.
This is unbelievable. So a single missed $50 payment cascades into a $200 tow, a $75 reset fee, and the original debt. It is an incredibly steep financial cliff.
It really is.
And it doesn't end with the private company, does it?
No, because the private company's database is linked to the state.
Right.
Financial noncompliance, meaning missing an appointment because you couldn't pay, is actually logged as a program violation.
Oh, no.
The private company notifies the state monitoring authority, and the state may then extend your interlock mandate by another 30 days.
Which means you owe the private company yet another month of lease payments.
It is a totally self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah.
And honestly, it reveals a fascinating alignment of incentives between the state government and private enterprise.
Well, let's analyze those incentives, because when you look at the lobbying records and the financial reports we have here, the architecture makes perfect sense from the top down.
It really does.
The state gets exactly what it wants. Massive granular compliance data and a reduction in repeat DUI offenses, which obviously improves public safety. And they get this without having to spend millions of taxpayer dollars building the hardware or hiring the technicians.
The state entirely avoids the logistical nightmare. They simply pass the laws and let the free market handle the infrastructure.
Meanwhile, the private companies get exactly what they want too. A captive, legally mandated audience.
Right. They don't have to spend money on traditional marketing or customer acquisition.
Why would they? The state legislature literally drafts laws forcing thousands of new customers into their subscription service every single year.
In fact, if you examine the legislative history of all offender laws, you'll find that alongside public safety advocates like MADD, some of the most aggressive lobbyists pushing for stricter interlock mandates are the manufacturers themselves.
Of course they are.
It is fundamentally in their financial interest to ensure that every single DUI offender, regardless of severity, is ordered into their technological ecosystem.
The state saves money, the private companies make money, and the financial burden of the entire surveillance apparatus is borne entirely by the individual offender. It is a stunningly efficient model of decentralized control.
It really is the ultimate evolution of risk management. Society has essentially concluded that the danger posed by intoxicated driving is so severe that it warrants a continuous physical, private intervention into the very act of operating a machine.
If we step back and survey the entire landscape we've covered today, the trajectory is undeniable.
Yeah, let's recap.
We started by looking at a tiny fuel cell measuring electrons from an oxidized breath sample. We saw how that data triggers 8-pillar cameras and blaring car horns on the highway. We explored how states abandoned passive license suspensions in favor of these open-ended performance treadmills.
Right.
We looked at how red stripe licenses bring this digital monitoring out into the physical world, at the grocery store or the bank. And we mapped out the private corporate architecture that profits from managing the whole system.
The trend is just completely unambiguous at this point. Lawmakers are applying this technology broader to more people, with fewer exceptions, for much longer durations, backed by total data logging.
Because it works.
Yeah. From a purely statistical public safety perspective, an engine that refuses to start is infinitely more effective than a suspended piece of plastic sitting in a drawer.
It forces compliance through immediate mechanical consequences. But it really leaves you with something profound to think about.
What's that?
Well, once society accepts that a private company can wire a sensor into your dashboard, charge you a monthly subscription, and shut your car off if you break a rule, The precedent is set.
The architecture is proven, yeah.
So if this public-private model of continuous, real-time vehicular monitoring is so wildly successful at managing the risk of a DUI, how long will it be before this exact same framework is applied to other driving infractions? Think about it. Will chronic speeders eventually have mandatory GPS-linked speed limiters installed by a private company that they have to pay $100 a month for?
That's entirely possible.
Or will a driver caught texting have to pay for an eye-tracking camera wired into their dashboard, ready to lock the ignition if they look down at their phone?
The technology is certainly there.
The blueprint for outsourcing continuous traffic enforcement to private technology companies has already been drawn, and it is expanding fast. Keep your eyes on the road, and as always, stay curious.